The Justice Department Civil Rights Division says a Mississippi prison violates the U.S. Constitution, specifically the Eighth and 14th Amendments. The notorious Parchman State Penitentiary is accused of routinely infringing the constitutional rights of people incarcerated by the following: failing to provide adequate mental health treatment to people with serious mental health needs, failing to take sufficient suicide prevention measures to protect people at risk of self-harm, subjecting people to prolonged isolation and solitary confinement in egregious conditions that place their physical and mental health at a substantial risk of serious harm, and failing to protect incarcerated people from violence at the hands of other incarcerated people.
Man, them folks took us out of 29, man. MSP 29, man. Put us in 32. Condemned. Been condemned 10 years, man. Look at the flow, man. And they just
How much time?
Man. Look at the flow. All the water
time?
in the flow, man.
Thank you. What happened yesterday?
Mildew everywhere, man. On the thing. Ain't no running water. Mildew everywhere. Paint coming out the wall, bro.
Right.
Mildew everywhere.
He didn't show up. He was on like
Black mold, man. That's
He was on who?
online.
Got it.
Yeah, man. Look at the paint, bro. Look at this condemned, bro. We ain't got no running water. We ain't ate. And we ain't ate in 10 hours, man. Get cold as a man. Look at all that black mold, man. Ain't nobody got no mats. No mats, bro. We sleeping on straight concrete, man. No mats. Look at these guys. No mats, no power. No power, none of that. Water everywhere, man. Water everywhere. No running water, man. No running water, period.
Spiders all in the same. Look how old this
No mat, man.
We ain't got in this bitch.
Straight concrete, man.
They took all our food, no hygiene.
We ain't got no hygiene, no toothbrush, no running water. Ain't none of that. Look at the water on the floor, man.
Ain't nobody here.
You wanna walk on?
We recording these folks.
Look at all this water on the floor, man.
We ain't got no phone to call out to nobody.
We can't go to wall phone. Look at the mold on here, man.
Yeah.
Shower ain't got no water, man. We ain't took no shower since we been here.
Man, show out here.
No running water, man. Hey, send them color y'all face and shit. Bro, look at mildew everywhere, man. Who in the side what they doing?
Now, that is cell phone video taken by one of the inmates showing the conditions in the prison. Folks, there are other videos showing dirty water, bad conditions. Also, a number of people have died in this prison. To understand the history of Parchman Penitentiary, you have to understand that this was a notorious prison that civil rights workers were often placed in horrible conditions, packed in jail cells during the 1960s. So this has been going on in Mississippi for several decades. Let's go to my panel right now. A. Scott Bolden, of course, a lawyer here in Washington, D.C. Monique Presley, lawyer, crisis manager. Robert Patillo, also a lawyer, of course, executive director of the Rainbow Coalition Peachtree Street Project, Wall Street Project. Let's have all three of y'all here. Let just get right to it here. Monique, Rock Nation, Until Freedom, Rukia Lumumba, and others, they have been protesting for years about conditions in this prison, the number of inmates that have died in this prison. Mississippi is notorious. And so this action by the Department of Justice and the Civil Rights Division, led by Christian Clark, is important. We detailed the other day how they have been targeting correction officers in other prisons as well, in South Carolina, in Oklahoma, in Florida. This is a continuation, but this, what they're alleging here, is a whole different level of abuse and mistreatment. Okay.
Absolutely, it's deplorable. There's no excuse whatsoever for the conditions that we just looked at and more. And it is a violation of every single person who's detained. It's a violation of their constitutional rights. I applaud the leadership of Kristen Clarke and the Department of Justice. And as I tweeted out earlier today, this is why voting matters. This is why representation matters. This is why when you have people elected in office who actually care about the humanity of conditions for all those who are under the control of the federal government or the state government, then you get different results. My only concern is what will actually be able to happen and how far the government's reach will be in terms of bringing about corrective change.
This is again, this prison has been notorious, Scott, for their abuse and mistreatment. It is as if the government of Mississippi doesn't give a damn about what happens there. Governor Tate Reeves, again, just utterly ridiculous in terms of how they're dealing with inmates there. And this action by the DOJ has to happen to put these folks on Front Street with their treatment.
Well, it's the first step, but it's not the last step. And Roland, let me be real clear with you. The only thing unique about Parchman as a state penitentiary is that it's still open. I can give you Moundsville from West Virginia, where Jimmy Gardner spent 27 years wrongfully charged. That's closed now, but there's several others. Stateville in Joliet, Illinois, where I grew up, it was just recently closed in the last 10 to 20 years. And so Kristen Clarke and her team can go to every state, especially across the South, but even in the Northeast and the West, and find these state penitentiaries that are in deplorable conditions because Republicans and Democratic elected officials believe that it shouldn't be a country club. Well, but it ought to have human decency standards. And so I'm really not surprised at this report. She can do 49 others, if you will. The reality, though, is they're either going to shut Parchman down, or they're going to rehabilitate it, or they're going to move the prisoners when they redo it. And then you got to remember, the private prison system, penitentiary system, would love to take over this facility or move these prisoners to one of their updated facilities. And then the horrors of Parchman just sit there. In Stateville, for example, it's a museum, if you will. They've done absolutely nothing with it. And it's a tourism attraction. And so we got to not only be cognizant, but vigilant and continue to put the pressure on these state penitentiaries to not only do better, but to figure out what to do better as we move forward, whether you move the prisoners out or whether you fix these prison systems, or better yet, at least to our elected officials, build another prison. They have whole towns set up around these prison systems.
You know, Robert, I think about that Robert Redford movie, Brubaker. That was about a prison in Mississippi. It was fictitious, but some say in many ways it was real. And to Scott's point, this attitude in America, oh, the hell with these people. They don't deserve to be treated like human beings. I grew up in Texas, and I can tell you, sure, I know the names of Supreme Court justices, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't know the names of many federal judges. But you know who's stuck in my head? William Wayne Justice. Literally, his last name was Justice. Why is that name stuck in my head? Because William Wayne Justice was a federal judge in Texas who ruled about inhumane conditions in the Texas prison system. He literally oversaw the Texas prison system for more than 20 plus years. I grew up reading the newspaper, watching news in Houston, and it was always Federal Judge William Wayne Justice. To Monique's point about voting, those are appointed judges. This action here is the Department of Justice. The Biden Department of Justice, they're there. Kristen Clarke is there because of how we voted. So when people talk about, oh, Biden hasn't delivered on this, hasn't delivered on that, I bet you this, if you got a loved one in the Parchman prison, you damn sure glad to see Kristen Clarke leading the Civil Rights Division. If you got a loved one in a South Carolina prison or the Oklahoma prison where they just got convictions of correctional officers, you are glad to see a Kristen Clarke leading a Biden-appointed Department of Justice. And so people need to understand when we talk about elections and them having consequences, this is a perfect example.
You're absolutely right, Roland. And for the people who make the argument of, well, you did the crime, so you should do the time, they don't really care about the conditions for prisoners. I'll remind them, not everybody in prison is guilty of the crime that they were convicted of. This is the reason we have post-conviction appeals. This is the reason you can go all the way to the Supreme Court about your case. And because of that, there's no reason to strip individuals of their basic human rights because they're incarcerated or they're in state custody. Beyond that, let's look at the way that we preach human rights around the world. We'd say that China is violating human rights, that Russia is violating human rights. What does it say when this is how we keep individuals, American citizens in this country, who one day will be released, who one day will return to society, knowing that this is how society treated them when they were at their lowest points? The purposes of punishment. Our purposes of punishment in this country should not be simply to torture people while they're incarcerated. It should be to rehabilitate them, to give them new skills, to make sure that when they return to society, they can be prosperous members of such. So when you say you did the crime, you do the time, you fundamentally misunderstand the purpose of our prison systems. We're not in a medieval star chamber any longer. We're supposed to be in an advanced 21st century, first world country. And because of that alone, we should be fighting for that. So we have to understand that the only difference between this prison and many others is that the people in custody had cameras that were able to live stream this thing. This is pervasive around the country. There's small state prisons way off the highway down in the middle of nowhere. So we need to make sure we're fighting on a federal level to put standards in place so that basic human rights are respected, that we're going to continue to have our position of leadership around the world and keep pointing at other people for the human rights abuses. This is something you would see in any third world country that America would try to bring democracy to. Let's bring democracy to Mississippi.
Well, we love talking about how people are treated in China and Iran and other countries. Well, this is called abuse in the United States. And so we certainly appreciate Kristen Clark and the DOJ, the work that they are doing when it comes to trying to hold these folks accountable. All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?